Welcome, everybody. I'm Shazelle Muhammad Mian. I'm the founder of African Link Initiative and our executive director. I'm so grateful to welcome you here to our first ever live streaming TED Ed Student Talks program. Shout out to our African Link Initiative family and friends watching on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And big shout out to African Ancestry family and friends also watching us live on African Ancestry's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And let us hear from you while you're here. Light up that chat box and with celebrations and cheers for our scholars and any questions you might have for them. At this point, I'd like to bring our scholars on the stage so they can say hi to you themselves.
Therville, thank you all for supporting and welcome to our TED Talk.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming, and thank you all for your support of the African Link Initiative.
Thank you all. That was a great job. And as we support our scholars today, keep in mind that this is also a live fundraiser. We're raising money for our scholars to take their birthright trips to Ghana. Some of you may know I took my own birthright trip to the continent in 2019 to 2020, and I am still being transformed from my time there. And our scholars deserve the same opportunity to connect with the motherland on their own and for themselves. We are halfway to our $3,000 goal, and I know you can help us get there. 100% of our proceeds are earmarked for our scholars' birthright trips, and those trips alone. And all of our donations are tax deductible as allowed by law through our partnership with United Way of Greater Mercer County. To give, go to africanlink.org and click donate. You can also support us by liking, sharing our posts on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Now to Shakir Muhammad for some housekeeping.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today to support our OLLI scholars. Just a few housekeeping items to get us started. First, please stay on to hear all of the students' talks if possible. Our scholars worked really hard, and we want to make sure that our last speaker is supported just as much as our first. Second, our scholars were each interviewed immediately after their live TED Talk recording, and we're so proud to announce those full-length interviews will go live after this event on the Diverse Conversations and the African Link Initiative YouTube channels. And third, we want everyone to have a great time today. We encourage you to interact in the chat, give feedback, encourage the teens, tell us who you are, where you're from, and interact with one another. So without further ado, let's get into today's program and introduce to you Elizabeth Darraville. Elizabeth is a 17-year-old high school student of Haitian descent whose purpose is to find meaning in her identity. Through her journey of self-discovery, she hopes to offer a detailed description of Haiti's past, present, and future in order to educate people on Haiti's worldly contributions. Elizabeth also hopes to bring awareness to Haiti's current climate of political, social, and economic unrest. With these goals, Elizabeth will deconstruct biased perspectives of Haiti, its people, and third world nations in general. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello. Like she said, I'm Elizabeth Therville. I'm Haitian from Haiti, and one thing about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that inspired me is his drive to instill hope within his listeners, because without hope, nothing can function. And for my talk, I titled it Haiti, What Happened to Us? And just a brief discussion or description about my talk. When you think of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, which country comes to mind? In this enticing talk, I challenge prejudices against Haiti by offering a timeline of its rich history and contributions to the world through this detailed talk, and more to come about Haiti's current plight and the causes. I hope that people will cease to view third world countries negatively. Hello, everyone. When you think of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, which one comes to mind? We're the type of nation that you see on CNN once in a while, when natural disasters hit or when political corruption is the topic of the day. You guessed it. Or did you guess? By a raise of hands, how many people picked Haiti? Okay, it's okay to raise your hand. See, I want to challenge everyone in this room. What if I told you that Haiti was and is one of the richest nations? This would probably seem unreal to most people because Haiti is poor economically. But at one point, we weren't. So I want to give you guys a brief history on Haiti. Christopher Columbus sailed in the ocean blue, and he fell upon an island in the West Indies. When he landed, he founded a pre-established society of indigenous people, known as the Taino. Yeah, he didn't actually discover anything. Bringing forth disease and brutal force, the Taino were wiped out. The fertile soil needed tending to grow sugarcane, which demanded arduous labor. Soon, West Africa became France's prey. But this is when the shift occurs. This is the start to Haiti's powerful beginnings. I choose to look at France's colonization of Haiti as an opening. Slavery, an unnecessary evil that made Haitians have this feeling and need and burning desire to want to revolt. I don't know what formed in us to be so daring in a time of brutality and fear. The only explanation is that it's in our blood. So I want you guys to imagine people in Africa and their tribes suddenly being taken away in Senegal, Togo, Benin, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now imagine them being forced under inhumane labor, forgetting their identity, having a new name, eventually revolting and forming their own nation. This powerful nation of resilient people is what made Haiti the jewel of the Antilles. We were seen as jewels because we offered 80% of the world's coffee and sugarcane. While you were imagining all of this, it probably didn't occur to you that this powerful nation would be forced to pay their oppressors back $21 billion with interest. $21 billion. Think of everything Haiti could have done with $21 billion. I think to myself, maybe we wouldn't be in this position if we didn't have to pay all of that money back. Think of the infrastructure, think of the climate that Haiti's in. Maybe we wouldn't be in that place. Doesn't this sound backwards? I'm forced to come to a nation that's not my own, forget my own identity, only to pay you back for being free. France's lack of acknowledging Haiti's independence is what caused our economic depletion, and it led to a cultivation of toxic mentalities within the Haitian culture because of generational trauma. Way too often, when a man sees a treasure, what do? They tarnish its beauty and degrade its value. Haiti is a hidden treasure. It's a diamond in the rough, but not everyone views us this way. Although Haiti became the second freest country and the first Black nation in 1804, we were still given a poor narrative. Haiti was titled the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, more than the first Black nation. But what brought us here? What and who is responsible for our poverty? When I was younger, I wasn't aware of Haiti's poverty and its suffering because its history was erased, rewritten, and ignored. So for the longest time, I continued to pitch my ethnic background, excited to see if other people would see Haitians in the same light that I do. I was always choosing it as my topic of choice for projects to spread more awareness that, hey, we exist too. But I came to a realization that it's more than just letting people know we exist, but that we're powerful. Haitians, we're so giving and we're so helpful, even when it's not reciprocated. I mean, we helped expand countries, hence the Louisiana Purchase. Yeah, maybe some of you didn't learn that in class, but we were responsible for the US expanding 2 times more than its actual size during the time. We willingly helped other countries gain their independence, hence Colombia, Simon Bolivar, and his negotiations with Haiti to help Colombia become its own union. But everything that I just told you would be summarized as a paragraph in most textbooks. And I'm only speaking for America. Just imagine what people from other countries don't know. I remember at the age of 6, watching news coverage on January 12, 2010. This is the date that shook Haiti to its core. I witnessed the shock of my parents as they saw on live TV the aftermath of their country. 6 is a young age to witness the magnitude of earthquakes, but I could still feel the shock and the devastation through the TV screen. Infants getting crushed by crumbling buildings. Families wondering when they will be reunited with their family if the earthquake didn't get to them first. I want to show you guys a picture of this Haitian mother. And I want you guys to just look at it for a second. She's sitting on a broken promise, on a broken dream. Where is she going to go? How is she going to raise her child in the midst of chaos? She has the look of disappointment. She's probably dwelling on what just occurred. What's her next move? How can she suddenly move on from this? Now, even though I showed you this picture, I still want you guys to know that Haiti is a beautiful island. It's 1,888 miles away, but it's still the nearest thing to me. So here I was speaking Haitian Creole, but I had vague information on my history. My true history teachers were my parents, but there was always a discrepancy because they didn't know Haiti's entire beginnings. I frequently asked my mom questions on Haiti's past. Mommy, who created the Haitian flag? Or mommy, what was my last name before Darreville? She doesn't have the answer. And while we're all searching for answers on our identity, Haiti's being deprived of strong political leadership. Either it's too many foreign hands trying to fix us, or gangs within the country itself who have no interest in the progression of Haiti, which in turn separates us. Whether it be through continuous social and political unrest, corruption, poverty, and death. But nobody's listening. Nobody seems to care about what's going on in Haiti. Nobody seems to understand the suffering that we're facing. But refuge is quickly offered to other countries in need. Now, I say this not out of bitterness, but out of a realization that Haiti is truly invisible to the entire world. I looked at my father's expression of sadness and disappointment when I asked him if he still listens to news about Haiti. He told me he listens from time to time, but it's usually dark and it's negative. It's the same thing every day. Nothing's changed. Is Haiti capable of change? Will this great nation that refused oppression and slavery suddenly crumble? Is this our fate? L'union fait la force. This is a slogan Haitians used to live by. It means in unity we find strength. We had this unity when we revolted and formed one nation. So, I come here to encourage all of you to realize that Haiti is here to demand respect. We want something more. We're here because we're revolutionaries. We were the first, and we won't be ignored. And we won't be in a situation where whips will ever be used against us ever again. Because we suffered a lot to get here. So I encourage each and every single one of us here, do your research. Look more into Haiti and what's going on, the political unrest, the death, the unnecessary things that are going on. Because it all sounds like a broken record. People dying, poverty, it's the same thing. But if you listen to a broken record several times, maybe you find a different tune out of that same broken record. Maybe you hear the guitar or the G minor on a piano. What I'm trying to say is that Haiti will have a new tune. And I remember my mom saying she was going to disassociate herself from Haitian news for a while. But I watched that she continuously kept immersing herself through the news. She just couldn't disassociate herself with her own people. She had to know what was going on. And I realized she did this because she was searching for a new tune of triumph. She was searching for a tune where she will one day get the opportunity to spend the rest of her days, as she would say, "No pays moi," in my country. So Haiti will have a new tune of triumph. And one example is the Haitian business Caribou. It's having a comeback, and it's a business that sells coffee. Remember how I told you that Haitians were responsible for 80% of the coffee in the world? Yeah, we're coming back. We're making our footprint on this world, and we will not be ignored. So I ask of you again to do research. And I want all of us to respect third world nations, because whether we realize it or not, we're sitting in the seat of opportunity because of countries like Haiti. Thank you. One, political corruption is the topic of the day.
Fantastic job, Elizabeth. That was a great job. Thank you so much for your talk. Now we'll bring up Shakira to introduce our next speaker.
Like my mom said, Elizabeth, that was absolutely amazing. I enjoyed it so much. And now I'm proud to introduce Mr. Ricky Singleton to read Nia's bio.
Over the past few years, Nia has participated in a wide variety of clubs and activities such as the Princeton Girls Choir, Lawrence Middle School Chorus, and the Alvin Ailey Extension. Nia is also a member of the Jack and Jill of Mercer County Teen Group and is a former Lawrence Middle School cheer captain and Lawrence Middle School intramural volleyball player. He is also a current freshman track student athlete from Montclair High School. Nia is a member of the Montclair High School Black Student Union, Montclair High School DECA Club, and the African Link Initiative, known as ALLY. Since joining ALLY, Nia's interest in supporting and learning about Black culture has grown. Nia is especially interested in learning how to advocate for families impacted by police brutality. Please welcome Nia Joy Singleton.
Hello, I'm Nia Joy, and one thing about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that he inspires me, like he inspired millions as well, to encourage and have faith in others because he had a dream that we all would be united one day. Is justice for one and justice for all? In my talk, I will explain how Black people have been unjustly killed as a result of police brutality. I also shed light on how ineffective policing skills have galvanized Black communities to demand safer communities for all. I Can Breathe is a reminder that we can collectively change police brutality through protests, changes to law, and proper police training. Eric Gardner, Dante Wright, Paul O'Neill, Atiana Jefferson, DeMarcus Semmer, Alton Sterling, Jordan Edwards, Michael Brown Jr., Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. These are pictures of African Americans who were unarmed and lost their lives due to police brutality. These are fathers, daughters, sons, siblings, and children that lost their lives too soon. Why did each of these unarmed civilians have fatal encounters with the police? Why is there a pattern of behavior that executes Black bodies, especially Black men, more than any other race? We all know Black Lives Matter. So why was this fact not honored by the police officers who killed these people? These officers took oaths to protect and serve all citizens, but they broke their promise. According to the New York Times article written in 2015 by Sheila Dewan and Opal Jr., 12-year-old Tamir Rice was fatally shot in the abdomen at point-blank range by Officer Lohman, who was an 8-month rookie. He arrived on the scene after reports of a suspect with a gun. This was in November 22nd, 2014. Around this time, I was 8. Imagine an 8-year-old looking up to Tamir Rice as a leader, as a friend. No one has to witness ineffective policing skills as a kid or an adult. I believe that all African Americans should live in a safe environment where all feel safe to even go to a park. Sadly, in 2020, the Justice Department prosecutors concluded this evidence insufficient to prove beyond reasonable doubt this officer willfully violated Tamir Rice's constitutional rights. But what about his mother, Samira Rice? What about his 14-year-old sister who rushed to the scene at the time of his death in 2014? As a society, do we want playful toy-carrying guns 12-year-olds shot and killed at their neighborhood parks? I think not. In April 14, 2021, the Rice family requested the Justice Department to reopen the case. Senator Sherrod Brown and Representatives Tim Ryan, Joyce Beatty, and Marcy Kaptur signed a letter dated April 23, 2021 to the Department of Justice. The claim is justice delayed is justice denied. And accountability for Tamir Rice's death has been delayed for more than 6 years. Unfortunately, the killing of Tamir Rice is just one of the stories I have chosen to explain. Fatal encounters with police officers are irreversible tragedies that have galvanized communities to demand police reform now. Enough is enough. As a nation and a global community, we saw enough is enough with the 9-minute and 29-second killing of George Floyd by former Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin. He knelt on Floyd's neck even after he lost consciousness. This unacceptable display was traumatic for the world. But imagine being one of his children. Imagine hearing these last 7 statements from George Floyd. Mama, Mama, Mama. A 46-year-old man was calling out to his dead mother, who died 2 years prior. This invocation and prayer did not stop the officer from killing Floyd. Please, man. This was a man-to-man reasoning cry from Mr. Floyd. He was beckoning the officer to see him as a human being. His plea was ignored. You're gonna kill me, man? Floyd's third statement was a warning to Officer Chauvin and the other officers who stood by and watched. I can't believe this. This was Floyd's 4th statement. He expressed disbelief and despair. At this point, he felt hopeless. Tell my kids I love them. This is his 5th statement, and it speaks for itself. A family in mourning and a heartbroken community still lives with the aftermath of this tragic loss. I'm dead. This hurts the most. This was a public lynching of a Black man in broad daylight. Another man was lynched today, was a dark slogan on a flag outside, hanging outside the NAACP office between 1920 and 1938. Sadly, this flag could still be hung in the 21st century. This is due to racism and injustice, like we saw with Mr. Floyd. Floyd's final words, "I can't breathe." These are the same words of Eric Garner, who died from a prohibited chokehold by the police officer over the suspicion of selling cigarettes in Staten Island, New York. As a result, "I can't breathe" became a popular chant of protesters who were fed up with the slaughter of black bodies. I would love to remix this slogan by saying, "I can breathe. I can breathe and be heard as a strong and vibrant citizen that demands justice and police reform now. As a young woman, I can breathe for victims like Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT worker that was killed in her home. I can advocate for more states to pass laws that would limit the occasion where police use no-knock warrants. A year after Taylor's death in March of 2020, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear signed a bill into limiting the use of no-knock warrants. This is a micro step in the right direction, but more needs to be done. Taylor's family needs justice and action from lawmakers. Say her name won't bring her back, but changes to the law can make a difference. In closing, I want you to remember their names: Eric Garner, Dante Wright, Paul O'Neill, Atiana Jefferson, Alton Sterling, Jordan Edwards, Michael Brown Jr., Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and say a prayer for their families. Thank you.
That was awesome. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And here's Shakira to bring on our next speaker.
Thank you, Nia. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. As children, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Maybe the better question is, who do you want to be? But we're taught to look for the answer in our communities, in our schools, and in our families. For so many Black children and children of color, though, finding inspiration that looks like us is challenging. We learn about trailblazers like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Shirley Chisholm, but do we see faces that look like theirs when we think about being a firefighter or an astronaut? I'm 33 years old and didn't really learn about NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson until the movie Hidden Figures premiered in 2016. This Dr. King Day, let's honor his mission by continuing our work to be an example for the next generation of Black brilliance. With that said, I'd like to introduce Jermaine Blunt Sr. to read Jermaine Jr.'s bio.
Good evening. Jermaine Blunt Jr. is a senior student attending West Windsor Plainsboro High School North. Jermaine has enjoyed experiences as an African Link Initiative scholar and most recently with the TED Ed Student Talks Club. Jermaine is also active in extracurricular activities, including the Literary Book Club, martial arts, the 100 Black Men, and his local chapter of Jack and Jill of America, where he has served as historian, chaplain, foundation chair, and currently holds the position of treasurer. This past summer, Jermaine was selected as one of 3 rising high school seniors at his school to attend Boys State program at Rider University. Jermaine plans to attend Hampton University in the fall with a major in finance and the MBA program. Introducing Jermaine Blunt Jr.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jermaine Blunt, and one thing that inspires me about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is his everlasting faith, because that served as his main motivator for his work. It served as his foundation while leading the civil rights movement. The title for my TED Talk is Hidden History. History is written by the victors. My talk reflects on my childhood passion for history and the shocking truths I learned throughout my journey to uncover the hidden history of African Americans and the lengths people have gone in order to suppress that information.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Jermaine Blunt, and my topic, or my title of my speech, is Hidden History. Throughout history, those in power have changed the record to favor themselves, often at the cost of those being oppressed. Until lions have storytellers, hunters will be seen as the heroes. How many of you remember something you learned in history class? Just raise your hands. Columbus, probably. Revolutionary War, safe. Slavery, probably, yeah. How about redlining? Yeah. Gerrymandering, lost cause, yeah, me either. These topics have not been taught. When I was younger, in my free time, I'd read history textbooks from our teachers, and I would watch historical documentaries and YouTube videos. If you can't tell, I'm a history buff. And I am because I've always seen history as a story separate from my own, apart from my reality. And eventually, I started to realize that I have to find myself in history. So I began to look in our school's history textbooks. And the only people I saw that looked like me were either in chains or working in fields. And that was a shock to me because, well, I'm not a slave. So what happened? Why can't I find myself in history? So I began to really look past the textbooks, the documentaries, and the conventional educational system. And there I found it. I found the often hidden history of African Americans in this country. I found out about gerrymandering, redlining, lost cause revisionism, and many other things. And all these systems and laws were put in place to prevent people from knowing the truth. Let's talk about those things. In the 1930s, the United States was having a housing shortage, and the federal government decided to install a new program to segregate housing. They masked it as a way to give white middle-class families homes. However, many African Americans were segregated to poor sections of cities and red blocks, thus the name redlining. The second thing I learned from my research was lost cause revisionism. It was initially formed after the Civil War by Civil War vets and their families to try and change the narrative of the Civil War. They stated that the Confederacy fought the war for states' rights rather than slavery. Organizations such as the Confederate Sisters of America would pressure local governments to erect statues and monuments for the Confederate soldiers. They even managed to have a statue at Arlington National Cemetery. One of their most famous advocates was 28th President Woodrow Wilson. He not only segregated the federal government, but he also played the film Birth of a Nation on the South Lawn, calling it History with Lightning. For those of you who don't know, Birth of a Nation is a silent film that was released in 1915 that was instrumental in warping African American history. The film portrayed African Americans as evil and deceitful people who were unworthy of equality, while portraying the KKK as a force for good. And the third topic that I researched was gerrymandering. Every 10 years after the census, the United States government redraws districts so they're proportional to population. However, there are little to no laws regulating those in power from drawing them however they want. As a result of this, gerrymandering is the practice of redrawing districts to favor one party over the other. This makes elections less competitive, representational, and unfair, especially towards people of color. While there have been several atrocities enacted against Black people in this country, however, through knowing our history, we also uncover many of the triumphs we have over our circumstances. When I was 10, I wanted to be a pilot. If Bessie Coleman, the first African American pilot, could do it, So could I. When I was 15, I wanted to be an architect. If Imhotep, the famous Egyptian architect, could do it, so could I. And currently, I'm planning on studying business finance in college. If those on Black Wall Street could do it, then so could I. Dr. Martin Luther King stated that education plus character, that is the true goal of education. While I agree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., how do you make that actionable? I propose a simple 3-step plan to learn from our history. Number 1, understand that our textbooks are incomplete. Consider your sources of information. Number 2, it's important that we are all cognizant that we are all at different stages of learning. And we should seek to understand a person's perspective and provide concrete evidence. And finally, we should use history to inspire and remind us of what is possible. History reminds us of our potential, the challenges our people faced, and the barriers we overcame. Through this talk, I've shared with you a way forward by researching our history. The true purpose of education is to obtain and apply knowledge. And as we learn our past and apply our knowledge to the present, we can change the future of our people. Thank you.
That was absolutely wonderful, Jermaine. Thank you so much. Next up, I'm actually going to introduce Mr. Clyde Penn Jr., who's going to read Xavier's bio.
Good evening. Xavier is a ninth grade student attending Lawrenceville School. He's a member of the Lawrenceville's football and basketball team and also part of their investment club. Xavier is also a member of the Black Men's Alliance, is an African. He's also the African American Link Initiative Scholar. He enjoys watching movies, writing, athletics, and various aspects of business such as trading and watching the various markets and businesses. So I welcome everyone to listen and enjoy the TED Talks from Xavier Penn.
Hello, everyone. I want to start off by, as everyone else has done, with what Dr. Martin Luther King and how he has inspired me. So I want to talk about how, one, I am, because we're talking about our identity, I'm Caribbean and newly found out that I'm also Yoruba from Nigeria. And one thing that inspires me about Dr. Martin Luther King is his perseverance, even under intense pressure and scrutiny, because perseverance is the only way to make your goals a reality. So the title of my talk is The Black Monolith, the single story of the Black experience in film. We love variety, right? Variety in ice cream, variety in games. What if I told you we lack variety in one area? In this informative talk, I delve into the lack of variety or diversity in the expression of Black stories through film and how this goes back to the era of hip hop. The idea for this talk started on December 2nd, 2018. On that day, my family and I went to watch an animated film titled Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And for those that haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a great coming-of-age story with great action, and the animation is beautiful. And luckily, many people agree with me, as you can see on the DVD. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature of that year. Though all those things contributed to my enjoyment and overall love of the movie, what truly grabbed me in was the main character of Miles Morales, and particularly how I could relate to him and his struggles. As someone that enjoys writing, specifically of characters that look and act similar to me, I know the feeling of watching someone you write watching someone you write succeed and how gratifying it is. So as I watch Miles Morales, a minority from a tight-knit community, attending a prestigious private school, struggling to fit into a new situation that he thinks he didn't earn. That hit home because that story being told was so similar to my own, and it allowed me to impart myself onto the character of Miles Morales. and feel everything he was feeling. After exiting the film, I went home and immediately looked up movies with black leads and began watching. Movie after movie, story after story. I found myself missing the feeling I had during my time watching Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Because the characters were people I couldn't relate to, someone who I was unable to impart myself onto. However, from my viewings, I noticed a pattern in the characters and the stories, certain archetypes and story beats being reused, a thing that wasn't present in other films. When I discovered this, I began to ask the question, why? Why was this the case? Why was it that black films had such little variety in the stories they told compared to others? Why was it that black characters in other films were less relatable than Miles Morales? When I say less relatable, I don't mean that the characters don't have the ability to be related to, but that the stories which are being told only cater to a specific group, and that traces back to the 1990s, during the era of hip-hop. During this time, a type of film coined the hood drama was a common film containing black characters. We define the hood drama as, quote, having majority black actors in urban settings, and became popular with the release of movies such as Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood. These were the movies I ended up watching with black leads, and as I said earlier, the stories hit similar beats. So let's look at the Google synopsis of the two stories that define the genre, that being Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society. For Menace to Society, the synopsis goes as follows. After growing up in the gang lifestyle of the Los Angeles projects, 18-year-old Kane Lawson wants a way out. Everyone around him, including his unpredictable friend O-Dog, is trapped in their lives of crime and violence. With the help of his caring teacher and supportive girlfriend, Kane plans to leave the city for good. But in a series of tragic events, Kane realizes that escape will not be easy. The synopsis for Boys in the Hood goes as follows. Trey is sent to live with his father, Furious Styles, in tough South Central Los Angeles. Although his hard-nosed father instills proper values and respect in him, and his devout girlfriend teaches him about faith, Trey's friends Doughboy and Ricky don't have the same kind of support and are drawn into the neighborhood's booming drug and gang culture, with increasingly tragic results. Just from these two synopses, I found two archetypes and story beats common in these stories. The first archetype I want to talk about is the escapee, or the outsider, like Kane from Menace to Society and Trey from Boys in the Hood. This is the character that wants to escape, or is from outside of the urban community, who, with the help of a mentor and or love interest, sees the problem in the community and escapes it. The second archetype is what I like to call the prisoner archetype, and as the name suggests, is the character that is trapped in the cycle of violence, drugs, and gangs, and is unable to see past their current situation. This character is also more likely to have a street name like O-Dog and Doughboy. These stories, these hood dramas, as they were coined, told the stories of many black people from urban areas of America, the struggles and sacrifices they had to make to survive and thrive. And for those that live that reality, those are stories that they can greatly relate to. But for others, not in that situation, others like me, I can't relate to those struggles. I can't see myself in those stories. But due to the proliferation of quote unquote hood dramas, it became synonymous with the black experience, when this is not the case. The black experience is not a monolith. Your experience might be different from mine. My experience might be different from hers. But with only one view of the black experience being proliferated, it leads to a single idea of the black experience. I feel this harkens back to a TED Talk made by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie called The Danger of a Single Story, where she says, in reference to both the negative and positive stories of her life living in Africa, quote, all these stories make me who I am, but to insist on these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that form me. The single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. And this is exactly what happened to Black stories in film, where the stories being told about us, the stories told about us in film, made our experience look like a monolith. And this isn't just untrue, it's unfair. So, with all that in mind, I know you're dying to know whether the situation has improved. And I'm happy to say it has. Recently, movies with more diverse stories pertaining to Black people have been released. Black Panther, the story of an African king leading a technologically advanced country. The Five Bloods, a story about Black war veterans returning to Vietnam to find the remains of their squad leader and the gold they left behind. Though this isn't listed up here, another example would be The Wonder Years, the story of a Black family growing up in suburbia in the 1980s. And though this isn't a movie, I wanted to include The Stars Beneath Our Feet by David Barclay Moore. Though this story takes place in the streets of Harlem, this plot isn't about the main character escaping the hood. It was about a young Black boy grieving over the loss of his brother and coping through his imagination and the use of Legos. This shows that circumstances don't make a story relatable. It's the stories themselves. And if we continue to vary the stories pertaining to Black people, then the monolith about the Black experience will cease to exist. Thank you.
Wow, that was absolutely amazing, Xavier. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, I'm so proud to introduce you all to Oluwatoyin Tella to read her daughter Aoife's Bible.
Good evening. Aoife Teller Swan is a 15-year-old young lady in the 10th grade. Aoife's rich cultural makeup is Yoruba, Jamaican, and Bahamian. Aoife is a self-directed scholar with a strong passion for dance, entrepreneurship, law, psychology, and history. For the past 3.5 years, she has been a dancer with Cherokee Youth Association, a performing arts group based in DC. Along with penning science fiction stories since the age of 7, she has won various awards for her creative writing. Aoife recently started her business with Seagrass Jasmine in 2021. She was also our lead initiative intern for 2021.
I am Baby from Equatorial Guinea, Jamaican, Yoruba, and Bahamian. One thing about Dr. Martin Luther King that inspires me was his ability to respect other leaders in the human rights movement who had different views of him, such as Malcolm X.
Thank you, people. Dr. Carol will read the presentation.
Looks like we're having just a little bit of technical difficulties. We'll get her video up, right?
Okay. My talk is going to require audience participation. I want you all to close your eyes. And I want you guys to imagine. Imagine walking into a hospital, excited to give birth to a beautiful new life. You feel that something's going wrong, so you tell the nurse. The nurse tells you, just shake it off. Everything's going to be fine. It's normal to experience nervousness before giving birth. Something, in fact, was wrong. Or imagine having a sharp ongoing pain in your leg. You go to the hospital and tell the doctor, who just tells you to shake it off because the pain was just in your head. The pain was in fact not just in your head. Black people, more specifically Black women's, physical and mental health is not taken seriously by the healthcare industries in America. In the 19th century, the so-called father of modern gynecology, Dr. James Marion Sims, experimented on his patients who were Black enslaved women. We don't know those victims' full names, but we do know 3 of those victims' first names: Anacha, Betsy, and Lucy. Dr. Sims experimented on Black women's reproductive systems without giving them any anesthesia. Let me repeat that. A doctor experimented on Black women's reproductive systems without giving them any anesthesia. How could someone do this to another human being? He did this because he believed that Black people couldn't feel any type of pain. And at that time, Black people weren't seen as human. But why does this matter? Well, first, it matters because I am a Black woman. And it also matters because there are still family physicians, emergency physicians, psychiatrists, gynecologists, neurologists, and more in the medical industry today who still have false beliefs like Dr. Sims, and that Black patients are left in the hands of. And this matters because I am a Black woman, once again, and I deserve to be treated like a human being. Serena Williams is a famous example, as she's a victim of these false beliefs. She told a nurse that something was wrong during her labor. The nurse thought that her pain medicine might be making her confused. Miss Williams insisted on a CT scan, and when the doctors finally gave her one, small blood clots were found settled in her lungs. When she went in for surgery, doctors found a hematoma had filled her abdomen. A filter was placed in one of her major veins to keep more blood clots from traveling to her lungs. If Miss Williams didn't insist on care from the doctors, she would have died. Miss Williams' fame helped bring this issue to the forefront, but there are still countless Black women who aren't famous, who have suffered at the hands of medical establishment due to bias. One study of 400 hospitals at the United States showed that Black patients with heart disease receive older and cheaper treatments than the white patients. After surgery, they're discharged earlier from white patients at a stage when discharge is inappropriate. The University of Minnesota School of Public Health looked through 1.8 million Florida hospital births between 1992 and 2015. They found that Black newborns are 3 times more likely to die than white newborns. But when the doctor that cared for newborns was Black, the mortality rate of Black newborns was cut in half, cut by 50%. Now, I want you all to close your eyes again. Imagine you're a mother of 5, it's 1951, and you have abnormal bleeding in your reproductive area. So, you go to the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. You go under several treatments for cervical cancer, but sadly passed away in 1951 at 31 years old. But a doctor, Dr. Gay, saw that your cells doubled every 24 hours, unlike other patients with cervical cancer. So, your cells were then, and still are, used to study the human genome, to test the effects of radiation, played a role in the development of the polio vaccine, and so much more. But guess what? This is a real story of Henrietta Lacks. On August 2021, she would have turned 101 years old. Her cells have lived 70 years longer than she did. Her family is now suing a biotech company that have used her cells without their permission. Why? Why are Black people's mental and physical health not taken seriously? And why is this still going on today? Because of the racist mindsets and concepts integrated into society and medical education. Before 1865, American medical schools were completely closed to Black students, while a select number of Northern schools allowed some Black students admission. In 1920, Abraham Flexner, the so-called father of modern medical education, reported that, quote, the practice of the Negro doctor will be limited to his own race, end quote. But, quote, the medical care of the Negro race will never be left wholly to the Negro physicians, end quote. As a result of this, there are many medical books that have racial bias and beliefs, like Dr. Sims and Flexner, creating medical apartheid. Medical apartheid is a term in a book created by Harriet A. Washington, which talks about the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans, from colonial times to the present. Gaslighting is a specific type of manipulation where the manipulator is trying to get someone else or even a group of people to question their own reality, memory, perceptions, or even experiences. The 20th century still faces medical apartheid, but it's easier to report cases of racial injustice in the healthcare system. Maybe not in the exact moment due to frequent gaslighting, but on social media. Many, not just Black women, but Black men as well, record racist and biased encounters with the medical system and post them online. Now, there are more available Black-owned hospitals, Black nurses, Black doctors, and socially conscious people of different races and backgrounds in the medical system that are aware of this injustice. But sadly, in 2019, the Association of American Medical Colleges say that only 2.6% of the United States doctors are Black. The reason why is another story. But this data shouldn't matter. We as Black people should not have to take extra steps to ensure that our health is taken seriously by healthcare professionals. We are normal human beings who deserve the same care as others. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. That was awesome. What an amazing showcase of Black talent, Black joy, and what I call Black sunshine. You all did an amazing job, a beautiful job, and I could not be more proud of you. Thank you, scholars, for all the hard work and dedication you put into making today possible. Doing your talk, studying, learning, it was a lot, and I appreciate you. Thank you. Big shout out to our African Link Initiative and Diverse Conversations family and friends. And shout out to our African Ancestry family and friends all watching live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you for joining us, supporting our scholars, and donating so generously. Shout out and huge thanks to our parents and volunteers who helped make this event possible. Please remember to like, share, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at African Link Initiative. To donate, volunteer, or nominate a student, a scholar for our program, go to our website, africanlink.org. Thank you again for joining. Have a great night and make tomorrow a day on, not a day off, to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you all, and good night.